Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church, to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome back to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is Jason Braaten, your host. Today, we have back with us Ryan Loeslie. He is the pastor of Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Dimock, South Dakota. Welcome back, Ryan.
Hey, Jason. Glad to be with you again.
Yeah, it's good to have you. It was good to see you at the Bugenhagen conference just a few weeks ago, and to actually go to one of your sectionals on what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, that was fun. Pastor Ramirez and Pastor Uphoff and Gilbert, those guys, they do a very, very special thing with that conference every year. I look forward to going to it, seeing guys like you that I might not see otherwise, and being edified and learning and have an opportunity to, teach a little bit myself what I like to do, what I find helpful. That's a wonderful thing. So I had a good time too.
It is probably, in my estimation, the best conference of the year, besides the other Gottesdienst conferences that I go to. But it's the only conference I go to where we always end up doing some sort of physical activity, and that's just a blast.
Yeah, that's very much part of their design too, and it's good. I agree with it. It's a good thing, especially as we get older. Getting into your 40s and stuff, like that really is no excuse for you not to be using your body, Mm-hmm. You got to keep at it. So and that's probably part of what we'll talk about today a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nice segue. So you gave a presentation about the nuts and bolts of fasting for the Lutheran pastor. And, as we reflect upon the scriptures, our first parents before the fall, one of the main means by which they showed their devotion to God, their creator, was by a kind of fasting, a refraining from eating from a particular tree of a particular fruit. And then our Lord himself, though it is not commanded that we fast, assumes that we will be doing this, knowing that our lives are not body or soul, but that we are enfleshed souls and embodied spirits, that we are a whole person, physical as well as spiritual. In what way does fasting, in particular, really kind of touch both of those aspects so that both the physical and the spiritual are kind of brought together in this one discipline?
Yeah, that is, you've noticed. In all the things we can do with our body and our worship, fasting really seems to bring the two together. Fasting in itself is a very bodily practice, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
It's a very physical practice. It's not, and it's not actually uniquely Christian necessarily
Mm-hmm.
either. I mean, you look at really pretty much all the world religions. Most of them do incorporate fasting somehow. Islam does, Buddhism, Hinduism, they do that. And even today, like now that fasting is, it's definitely becoming more mainstream as a health
Mm-hmm.
practice,
Right.
compared to when we were kids. So like now you have a lot of people probably who really have no religious preference at all, who are practicing it. And so it's very bodily that way. There's nothing necessarily uniquely Christian about it. There's health benefits to it. But, where it is useful in the Christian faith, I would say, you talk about the worship of God it is such a good practice for humbling yourself, realizing that He is God and you are not. I think of Psalm 69 when it says, "When I wept and humbled myself with fasting." It's a discipline that teaches you that you really are not in charge, that you have to step back and humble yourself and wait. That is a very useful spiritual discipline for the Christian. And so I would say fasting is very spiritual that way, because you must humble yourself. Now, fasting also can be misused, and it can be a source of puffing oneself up. You know, I mean,
Sure.
you think of the Pharisee, Jesus' parable of the Pharisee and tax collector, Luke chapter 18. I mean, the Pharisee uses his fasting as a way to prop himself above the other man. So, like, there is danger right there too. Isaiah 58, talks a lot about fasting. It's a very, maybe the most famous chapter in the Bible, which talks about fasting in itself. He also talks about fasting as a way that people will quarrel with one another. They'll use sobriety. Sobriety can be a very powerful thing in many ways. They'll use it as a way to prop themselves up. But so I guess where I'm going is ideally, and more naturally, I mean, fasting is a way that you can humble your soul before your God. And also, the other thing I was going to say that makes fasting a very spiritual discipline, very useful for the Christian faith, is how fasting is associated with, I guess, first of all, I should say maybe repentance. That kind of goes hand in hand with humbling oneself, right? Repentance, but also prayer. When someone fasts, I mean, one thing I have noticed is it really does afford a man a better mental clarity, better focus, in a real discernible way. And one thing that is very, very helpful for is prayer. I mean, how many times are we just utterly, terribly distracted in our prayers, right? I mean, it's just shameful how bad we are at praying. The most, obvious example that comes to mind is praying the Our Father, right? I mean, how many of us pray that all the way through with sincere hearts and focused minds? I mean, we're really not very good at it. And fasting is a discipline which is very helpful. I'd stop short of calling it a miracle, but it's very helpful in a tangible way of helping clear your mind and giving you a posture, an attitude that you can pray. You are not going to be distracted by food. That's one thing. I mean, I've found very helpful, now that I've incorporated this discipline more into my life. My morning devotions, which I know I was taught, you were taught, most of our kind of generation at seminary was taught to do your morning devotions. You do these things in the morning, and to have all of that time just blocked away with food being, not a concern, that gives the Spirit room to work. And so I would say that's one place then where fasting really, really benefits the Christian in his spiritual life and devotion.
So is that by virtue of because I would think that if you're fasting and you're hungry, that you would end up being focused on food. So tell me how this works, right? How does it work that this helps you to be more devoted in or more clearly focused on the task at hand while fasting, because food is not the worry?
Yeah. I remember looking into this stuff and learning about it, and always, I've been kind of, fasting is something we've just always had to deal with, as pastors. I mean, you and I, we've been in the ministry a while now. I mean, you get to, Lent is all about fasting, right?
Right.
You get to Ash Wednesday. I mean, it's Matthew chapter 6, and then you don't even get a break. You get to the first Sunday in Lent, and it's Jesus's temptation in the wilderness, and it's like, oh, we got to deal with this somehow. And you never, at least in my life, I've found, well, on the one hand, I never did it a lot because we were taught that it was bad for you. I don't remember where, if I was in school or just in the media, just the basic thing is fasting is bad for you. Well, that's like one, maybe even two strikes against fasting right there, that the Bible, what the Bible's teaching us about it was at odds with what the world taught us, and we obviously have let the world catechize us way too much. This is really just, becoming real to me on a whole new level.
Sure.
With what I've learned about fasting. But on the other hand, so you have this nagging thing, it's inconvenient. On the other hand, that it's bad for you. On the other hand, it seems inconvenient, right? You want to do something, and then I always found myself not following through on it. And a big reason I always found that to be true is what you were just saying. Well, when you're fasting, you're supposed to be it's supposed to help you focus on these things. It's supposed to help you pray. It's supposed to open your mind and open up all these things. And that's exactly the opposite of what I found to be true. I would get hungry and I couldn't focus at all. And it just was terrible. Like, I can't do this at all. And this fasting thing, it seems to be, the very opposite of what they say it is. And it sounds like that's maybe been your experience a little bit too, when trying to do this. And the only reason that happens is because we're just very, very bad at this discipline. And we jump in without enough practice. And it's just like jumping into an ice cold pool or something like that. Your body pushes back against it. And so like one thing I found then, and then, like after reading more about this, the hunger pains you'll get when you begin fasting, the hard time you have in your mind focusing, because you literally start thinking about food. It's like an involuntary, obtrusive thought, here it comes, just like, the devil himself probably. But one thing I did learn through more experience and just reading about it is that feeling passes if you actually choose to stick it out. If you utilize, and this is one thing I found very helpful just in incorporating this practice, you use the clock as your friend. The clock helps regulate what you're doing. You just turn off consumption like a switch until the clock hits a certain point. And, your flesh is maybe going to bother you. It's your tummy's going to growl. You're maybe going to be a bit having trouble with your focus for a little while. But if you do stick it out, you tame the body that way, and it realizes, oh, this guy knows what he's doing, and a lot of those feelings pass. Yeah. So that's very helpful, and it really, and this is in the Bible. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Paul says, I discipline my body to keep it under control. Yeah. Your body, your flesh wants to throw you in many, many different directions. And this, honestly, we're talking about fasting from food, but I mean, this is the dopamine hit you get from your cell phone too. I mean, this is all kinds of indulgences that your flesh wants to do, and it literally hurts your flesh sometimes.
Yeah,
but we
funny
practice
thing is
discipline.
Yeah,
go ahead.
That's the it is a discipline. I think that's the thing to remember when those things hit, that it's gonna be work. But yeah. What I have found is that it's a different kind of work and a different kind of distraction than when I was, I don't want to say I was eating all the time, but not fasting. Whereas, after a meal, I would feel completely spent. Whereas now after a meal, I actually feel revived.
Okay.
I mean, have you, so it's not like, it's not like you're having a Thanksgiving feast every day, but it is just as tasty, but I don't feel like going to bed after it. And I don't feel foggy after that meal.
Yeah, that's good. And that may have to do, diet can have a lot to do with that, I think. Like a lot of sugar and stuff like that can make you pretty drowsy and just feeling like bad. But if you discipline the way you eat, and I think we're supposed to, after everything I've learned about this, we're supposed to eat meals, we're supposed to eat good solid meals and not snack. And once you are in a good rhythm with that, your whole schedule seems to go better, so eating is only the tip of the iceberg right here. Your eating is better, doesn't leave you so sleepy, your work. I mean, and we're fighting the flesh this whole time. This isn't, like I said, it's not some incredible miracle necessarily, but our work time, at least I have found, tends to be more productive. And then also rest is better too. I definitely sleep better at night. Go to bed tired, go to sleep, and you hit good levels of sleep, and you wake up at a regular hour. I mean, it really pays off in all levels of your life by practicing this discipline. And discipline, I've realized, is not it's one of those words that I think a lot of us are scared of. But at the same time, you kind of long for it. The Christian wants to be known as disciplined, and it does take effort, but it's not really the boogeyman that a lot of people fear it is. And we do need to teach people that it actually is helpful. It is good for humbling the soul, humbling the body, and all of that. And we don't like the sound of that, but it does help you in physical ways and spiritual ways too. So fasting is good to teach you that. And your food is very basic to your existence. You die without food. Well, if you learn that with food, you learn it in all areas of your life, your work, your play, your everything. It's a good baseline. Fasting is a good baseline place to start your discipline.
So a couple of things that you mentioned. First of all, the humbling aspect. In what way does it help or propel that kind of humbling experience? Is it because you feel hungry and you're not in control of how your body is reacting, and you finally see that, or what is it about fasting that brings out that humbling experience?
What I would say is you cannot have everything right now.
Okay.
You have to wait. You have to be patient. We would love to have everything right now. And I mean, isn't that the culture we live in? I mean, instant gratification has been it's been something I think I've maybe struggled with my whole life, even before the 21st century and all our technological changes and stuff. I mean, I when I was growing up, I had everything I needed and fairly quickly, very privileged. And when we get everything we want right away, it puffs us up. I mean, we think we are in charge. We think we are entitled. When you give children everything they want, what does it make them? I mean, it makes them spoiled. It makes them entitled. Well, really, as adults, we are not a whole lot different. I don't know if our self-development really is any beyond our kids. I mean, we're used to getting whatever we want right away. We're entitled. We think we're in charge. Fasting humbles you because it tells you need to wait and you need to submit to, the limitations that God has put on you, the limitations that your body, puts on you. If you burden your body too much with things, it won't be good. I would say when it comes to humbling the body, the teaching it to wait is the clearest way I could explain that.
Okay. And then you mentioned learning to use the clock as your friend. Expound upon that a bit. Yeah.
Well, I guess, I'll maybe talk a little bit here about just, maybe food and eating habits a little bit more. It's maybe not quite so theological or spiritual, but,
well, there's always a practical side to everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing that I found, just, trying to be a steward of my body, in failing at it in many ways over the years. It makes me think back to the seminary, and, you got Kramer Chapel, and we had those beautiful worship services there. And then you go to the Commons after chapel, and what do you got? You got the donuts, right? It's, and what did I do every time? I grabbed one because I could, I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's pleasure. It's, that makes me think about one time in the Commons there. Oh, one of my friends was watching his weight pretty good, and he said, "Ryan, you'll gain 10 pounds if you eat that donut." And I ate it. But anytime, but sometimes I would resist, I think, or you go, I mean, you've been in those situations where, somebody offers you something. It's really not good for you. It's a sweet or a bar or something like that. And I mean, it's just every single time you're confronted with this internal war that, do I eat this or not? And I mean, maybe 2 times you'll be a brave man and you'll resist it. But then eventually what happens? I mean, you get beat down and you break down, and that is, that's a battle. And we face these battles multiple times every day. I mean, I remember, well, and I still face this every day. I mean, you dedicate your morning hours to your study mostly. That's kind of what I do in the afternoons. You go hit your members in the hospital, you go see shut-ins, and then you run an errand for your wife before you go home, right? Or you go gas up, run at the grocery store, you go to these places, and I mean, there's just junk food everywhere. It's just everywhere, tempting you. And you walk into, your Casey's gas station, and you're bombarded by literally dozens of temptations right there. And it's hard to beat those down one at a time. Like you get beat down eventually.
Yeah, Casey's donuts. That's a real difficult thing, I think.
Oh yeah, their peanut butter Rice Krispie bars are are my struggle. But
yeah.
But get back at what you're saying though, to use the clock as your friend, it's consolidating all of those battles into one. You just say, I'm not going to do this at all. And that's a decision you make once during the day until the clock says, okay, you can relax, you can enjoy yourself, you can eat now. And I've found that to be just immensely helpful, to let the clock help me make those decisions, rather than facing every temptation individually, where, with this sinful flesh, I mean, it's so easy to fail. And the clock is helpful that way. It's not foolproof. I mean, but it's helpful and good. You're setting a clear boundary.
Yeah.
With fasting, you're setting for yourself clear boundaries. I mean, we deal well with clarity. I mean, we should aim for clarity in everything we do, especially as preachers who preach the Word of God, and our people benefit from that too. And fasting's helpful for that. Otherwise, the battle lines they're a lot harder to draw, and so fasting is helpful for that.
Okay. Now, our confessions and even our dogmaticians, Luther himself, discusses this type of thing. Where do the Lutheran divines, the Lutheran fathers, what do they have to say in terms of making use of this practice and this discipline in your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, Jason. Our fathers have dealt with all this stuff. It's all there for us already. I will, since you asked me that, I'm gonna get my books out here, and I'm gonna I'll read you a few quotes here and offer a little bit of commentary.
We're all familiar with what Luther says in the Small Catechism. So
right. Yep. Yeah. Fasting and bodily preparation is certainly fine outward training. Yep. And that's something we're all familiar with, and something the lay people are familiar with too, which is just awesome. So like, even though Luther in the Catechism doesn't expound on that a whole lot, and even though fasting is really not his main point right there, Luther wants to talk about faith. And that's what gets emphasized. That's what we emphasize. That's what the people learn. And that's good. And I think Luther just put that perfectly, because it's not our intention right here to tell our people, you've been doing it wrong this whole time. The best preparation for the sacrament is faith. I mean, that is true. That's the way Jesus intended it. I mean, this is a gospel. The sacrament is about the gospel and not our preparations. And so the way Luther put that in the Catechism, I think is exactly right. But he also talked about fasting as something that's a good outward training. And so it's there. And like, we can't ignore it, even
but
if
that's
it's just
what we
like
do.
a little. Yeah, I know. And this is why we got to have it. This is why we have to have this conversation right now, because it's in there, and we do have to deal with it, as men who care for souls, and as men who wish to, celebrate the sacrament, in a good and reverent way, and help prepare our people for it in a good way. So yeah, I mean, that's actually the best place, when you talk about what the Lutheran fathers did, to talk about this. Yeah. You remember what Luther said in the Small Catechism. That's actually number one.
Mm-hmm.
But I will. I got a couple things I'll read. From the Confessions right here. We got Augsburg Confession, Article 26, which is on the distinction of meats, where that is another thing that the Lutherans the confessors got well. Fasting is not a matter of just eating fish. That really isn't denying the body at all. But Augsburg 26 here says, furthermore, they teach that every Christian ought to train and subdue himself with bodily restraints or bodily exercises and labors. Then neither overindulgence nor laziness may tempt him to sin. But they do not teach that we may merit grace or make satisfaction for sins by such exercises. Such outward discipline ought to be taught at all times, not only on a few set days. And then they
just
quote,
during Lent.
Well, and that's another thing. But that's what I was going to say. This is the usefulness of Lent, though.
Mm-hmm.
Lent is a wonderful opportunity to get started with these things. Lent comes around every year. This is where you can actually start something that you can carry on for the rest of the year, or maybe even the rest of your life. But it says they teach every Christian ought to train and subdue himself with bodily restraints, right? That, I would say, is your fasting, right? That is a restraint right there. But then it also talks about bodily exercises and labors. So that is an active activity right there. Fasting is denying yourself. You could talk, another whole episode maybe about your bodily exercises and labors, which are equally important for the Christian to do, and really kind of a separate conversation. And honestly, something that pastors really ought to keep in mind too, because most pastors probably don't do enough labor with their hands. So that's something that's necessary for all Christians to do. So I think that's a very good quote right there. Every Christian ought to do these things. But then, of course, we make the distinction that we're not meriting grace or satisfaction for sins by these things. These are for regulating our own earthly lives, both physical and spiritual.
Yeah. It's self-discipline. And so in this way, we are, I don't know, would you say in that way we are imitating our Father in heaven who promises to discipline us?
Yeah. Or even, receiving that discipline too.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let me hit this other quote right here. This is Apology 15 on human traditions. It says, in addition to this putting to death, which happens through the cross, there is also a necessary voluntary exercise. Christ says, but watch yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with dissipation. I think another word you could say is gluttony, actually. Mm-hmm. And Paul says, I discipline my body and keep it under control, 1 Corinthians 9, and so on. These exercises are to be accepted because they are services. These exercises are to be accepted not because they are services that justify, but because they are assumed to control the flesh, should overindulgence overpower us and make us secure and unconcerned. And I what's really neat, and it's kind of a paradox. This is this English translation, which I'm pretty sure comes from the Latin of the Augsburg Confession, but Melanchthon calls it a necessary voluntary exercise.
Yeah.
That's definitely something to ponder, I think, especially for us as pastors, as we do these things ourselves and try to teach them to the people. Like, these are things we need to be doing, and yet you cannot really force them on people. It has to be voluntary. And you can't make a law about such things. And I mean, we would like to make a law, right? That's just kind of the default mindset that we have. But, Congress makes a law about everything, right? If you want to fix something,
right.
Make a law. But these
or
things
mandate.
do need... Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And then but the problem is, what happens once you do that? What happens once you make a mandate or a law? Everybody thinks they're virtuous because of it. And they think they're earning something because of it. And that's why we have to leave these things free. I mean, it's no wonder that these, something like fasting can go even whole generations without being taught or emphasized a whole lot, because it's hard. Like, you can't force people to do this. And that makes it very difficult. And we don't want to burden consciences that just haven't been doing this. I don't feel like burdening people. I don't think we should burden people who've never fasted before going to the Lord's Supper. Even though it's a good thing, but in the Christian life, we do need to exercise discipline, and exercising discipline with our food is, I said it before, just such a good, basic, and excellent place to start that can just kind of spread out and permeate all aspects of your life. But yeah, that necessary voluntary exercise, I think that's something for us to think about.
Yeah.
And then it says, Melanchthon says, but because they are assumed to control the flesh, should overindulgence overpower us, make us secure and unconcerned. And that's really kind of what I was talking about before, about becoming entitled. When you get everything you want immediately, it makes the flesh entitled, secure, unconcerned, and you don't appreciate anything. It really changes your whole mindset when you just consume without limit. It hurts the spirit, and this is why overindulgence, whether that be with food or honestly, anything, entertainment, whatever. I mean, these are sins, which you maybe could even trace back to the sixth commandment, which has to do with controlling yourself. It's not just, really the sexual desire, which the sixth commandment is about. It's about containing your whole vessel, and using it for God's glory.
Yeah, that's something that Mark Preuss has pointed out to.
Mark.
Me.
Mark maybe put that in my head lately. Is why I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, that chastity has to do with all of the body, not just sexual temptations, and that's where they would talk about fasting or temperance or other kind of virtues like that under the sixth commandment because of chastity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It does begin to highlight, I think, the fasting. I think it helps us to understand what Jesus means when he quotes Deuteronomy saying, "We do not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God." That we are going to wait, and we recognize that he is our greatest blessing. He is the one who actually provides life. And so just getting the food that we think we need all the time to sustain life ends up making us drowsy or lazy towards the things of God.
And actually, I mean, and with overconsumption, it actually begins to kill you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's true. Like, yeah. And you talk about what Jesus said in quoting Deuteronomy, in his temptation, but I mean, John chapter 6, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst.
Yeah.
We probably need to study those words a little deeper, meditate on them more thoroughly, and understand what that means, because we're kind of conditioned, at least I was conditioned to believe, in a sense, that I'm going to die if I don't eat supper tonight. Like, I mean, you panic about it. And wow.
Well, what is it that we say when we're
like, God,
really hungry?
I'm dying, right? Or
I'm
dying,
starving.
Starving to death. Yeah. And it's like, wow, that's absolutely not true. And God did not, and that's really showing a lot of, it's not appreciating God's design for the body, which he did not make to be so fragile. I mean, the Psalm says, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139. I mean, if that's true, you're not going to die if you miss a meal. God did not make the body to be that fragile, and we have a tendency to just treat ourselves too delicately. And actually, I'll segue into you're asking about the Lutheran fathers. One thing I've appreciated in Chemnitz in his examen is he talks about treating the body with too delicate care. So he says, therefore, Scripture wants such moderation employed in the use of food and drink, and of the things that pertain to the care of the body, that the body as the vehicle of the soul, talk about the connection between body and soul here, the body as the vehicle of the soul, as the ancients call it, may not overwhelm the mind, because it has been made coarse and fat by too much fullness and too much delicate treatment. So delicate treatment, just coddling everything, that makes us, Chemnitz says, coarse and fat. It makes us secure, and to suffer, and I'm not talking about torture, but just minor discomforts, which definitely the discipline of fasting affords. That is very good for the body, and also for the soul. The body as the vehicle of the soul, as the ancients call it, may not overwhelm the mind. Yeah,
that's actually something that we already know if we want to build muscle, right?
Right.
We
Absolutely.
We only grow muscle by resistance or time under tension. And
hormesis is what that's called, basically. Applying gentle discomfort, gentle stretching, for training your body to come back with a resilient response, a response that makes you stronger. Yep.
Yeah. So by this lack, we're actually strengthening ourselves for future attacks. Okay.
Yeah. And that's helpful. Yeah. You can talk about suffering, temptation and the attacks of the devil. I mean, this is helpful, when you suffer minor discomforts that can make you stronger. And so one thing, I mean, these exercises can help, emotional resiliency to make that stronger, mental toughness. I mean, these are pretty tangible benefits. These type of exercises can afford us, I mean, we've always known this about, like you say, exercise or building muscle, right? I mean, that's pretty much always been an open book. If you exercise, that can help you emotionally. spiritually even, we could maybe say, but fasting really goes hand in hand with this. And, one thing I found just kind of doing fasting a little more, I really exercise much more spontaneously having regular fasting in my life. It's a more natural, spontaneous thing for me to do. And so, and then the one just kind of feeds the other. So, bodily exercise is not, I think we kind of tend to compartmentalize it, I'm going to do this for losing weight or whatever, but it can be combined with other things in our life for our benefit.
So, oftentimes we think, I can't do that because I'm not really good at that. I'm not really good at fasting. And we use that kind of as an excuse to say, well, I'm not going to do that because it's not really my thing. But it seems to me that would be the very reason to do it, to get better at it. So what sort of, besides the clock as your friend, what sort of helps? I'm hesitant to say life hacks, but what sort of things are helpful to keep in mind when you're fasting? I mean, one thing that has kind of popped out since your presentation, I've tried to incorporate some of this into my own daily life, is I actually like water more. It tastes good.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Whereas before it would only, I would prefer something with flavor, but now water actually tastes good to me. What sort of things do you suggest to keep in mind along with using the clock as your friend?
Well, you can still maintaining good fluid intake is good. One thing you can do with your water is maybe add a pinch of salt to it, because salt is very necessary for your heart and your heart function. And, if you somehow stopped taking salt in, I mean, you would die. It's that necessary. It's just like air and water that way. And I found that that's good for the stomach too. That makes the stomach feel good. So that's a pretty good hack. I mean, that's the most obvious hack right there.
Okay.
But if you like to drink black coffee, I don't like black coffee on an empty stomach. I would always used to want to eat something before I drank my coffee, but actually if you drink your water first, when you wake up in the morning, then coffee doesn't bother my stomach. So I would say coffee in moderation. You drink too much coffee, that's just simply not good for you, I've found. But I mean, that's something that you can enjoy a little bit. Green tea is good to help you, but even those things are kind of a crutch, though. It's a good thing to take a deep breath and enjoy the process too, and enjoy those things which fasting affords you to do better, like reading the Word of God and praying. I've since doing this, I've gotten to know this book that Matthew Carver translated, the Lutheran Prayer Companion, and that's just something I've learned to spend more time in and appreciate and pray the prayers of a husband and of a pastor, and for my children and for the weather. I serve a rural congregation, mostly of farmers. It's been a real dry summer. I've been able to pray for them that way. Enjoy those things that you really do enjoy, according to the new man who's been regenerated, and because even those things, we'll find we shrug them off, even the things we love. And fasting, it helps us reorder our desires that we can enjoy those things which we really, really should enjoy, rather than seeking an escape. Even your cup of coffee is probably kind of an escape, but I don't, we don't have to get too legalistic about that stuff either.
Yeah. So what you're suggesting, it seems, is when the the discipline seems harsh, this self-discipline of fasting, when it seems harsh to you, the way of escape that God has provided is his word and promises, to delve into those and live by those things. So when you feel the hunger pang, when you think that you're being overcome, to take a deep breath and turn to his word at that time and the prayers of those who have gone before us, to reorient your mind on what's actually going on here. That this is not just a physical battle, but you're also engaged in a spiritual battle with your soul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that sounds good. Okay. One prayer that I pray in that prayer book is, the prayer of a husband had asked to God that I would eat my bread by the sweat of my brow, but not be aggravated by the heaviness of the toil. Mm-hmm. And there I would say that's a way of using prayer as a way to cope, not just with something you might be, with fasting, but I mean, your daily labor, your daily toil, your daily discomfort. God told you it's going to be this way. It's going to be by the sweat of your brow. There's no other way around that. But we can pray that we're not aggravated by it. Mm-hmm. And I would say that's helpful. That's good. If we believe God answers prayer, he can answer that one too. He's not going to take the sweat away, but he can help you receive that in a way that's going to be beneficial to you and beneficial to your family and those you love, and so you can be, a blessing in this world. So,
well, I think you've talked about this earlier, which is this. This is not a panacea. It's not a miracle thing, but and often that's what we're looking for. We're looking for like a one-stop shop to fix everything, or to take away all the difficulty. The point of all of this is that difficulty has been promised, and it's been promised for our good. May we receive it as a blessing from God instead of being aggravated by it. And fasting, it sounds like fasting helps you to learn how to do that, to humble yourself under God's discipline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in summary, it really is hard to put it better than Luther did in the Small Catechism there. It is fine outward training. It's maybe not more than that, but it's certainly not less than that either. And it's an avenue that I wish I had explored more, earlier in my life. But it's never too late for these things. I've known some other folks, older than me who have benefited from this a lot too. And it's helpful. It's good.
Well, excellent. Thank you for your time, Ryan. And all of you who'd like to hear more from Ryan, he's going to be presenting as one of the plenaries at the Bugenhagen Conference next July. So please try to check that out. Hopefully we'll see you there. I'm looking forward to that. That's given me a lot to think about lately since Pastor Ramirez asked me that. But hopefully that can be a blessing to me and a lot of people. So yeah, I'll definitely hope to see you there, Jason. Maybe be on the podcast again. That may be kind of fun too. Sounds good. All right. Well, you take care, Ryan, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Thanks, Jason. Have a good day.